You already know what a Veblen good is. Okay, maybe you don't know that you know, but you do know of them. Veblen goods are named after Thorstein Veblen, who wrote the treatise The Theory of the Leisure Class way back in 1899. In that work, he identified conspicuous consumption as status seeking behavior. The counterintuitive thing about Veblen goods is that they seem to, but don't really, defy the law of demand in economics, since demand for Veblen goods is thought to increase as price increases. Unfortunately, later thinkers have also offered that with Veblen goods, lowering the price may actually diminish demand over the long term. That last part may pose a challenge to crypto if NFTs turn out to be Veblen goods, as some are now proposing. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss this whole issue with Veblen goods and NFTs, the very smooth MuesliSwap Hungry Cow Mint, a hint from Ardana about this coming week, and Time Magazine running a cover that might be very relevant for crypto right now. If you and your significant other would differ on whether or not this image of a guy pouring champagne in the woods looks like a grand romantic gesture or more like part of the compulsive process of a serial killer, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. You know what Veblen goods are. These are certain types of luxury goods: champagne, fancy clothes, exotic cars, things that can be conspicuously consumed as a mode of status seeking, as they put it here in Wikipedia. So the tricky thing about Veblen goods is what is shown in this graph right here. So normal law of demand: as price goes down, quantity demanded will increase. With Veblen goods, as price goes up, demand also goes up. You'll remember that in the intro, I said this seems to defy the law of demand, but it doesn't really. And that's explained right here. This is because the good's social value depends on the price. In other words, the good itself changes as the price changes. And this is pretty easy to understand. A $12 bottle of Cristal is not the same good or product as a normally priced bottle of Cristal. And the demand for the normally priced bottle of Cristal is going to be very different than if consumers were somehow confronted with a $12 bottle of Cristal. Those are not the same product. They're not the same good at those different price points. If you are in the club, there is a big difference between having a normal bottle of Cristal on your table and having a bottle of Cristal that has like a $12 price tag on the side of it. If that could exist, if there could be a bottle of Cristal on your table and everyone knows you paid $12 for it, this is a very different social value than the normally priced bottle of Cristal. In this way, the good's social value depends on the price. Later thinkers after Veblen also offered that a corollary of the Veblen effect is that lowering the price may increase the demand at first, but will decrease the quantity demanded afterwards. So what does all this have to do with crypto? Recently, Robert Leshner made this post. Robert lets you know he likes chess, opera, and macroeconomics, but more importantly, he's the founder of Compound. Robert says, I think all NFTs are Veblen goods. Let's check back in a few years. While he's the first person I've heard say this, this doesn't seem too controversial to me. I mean, if you think about NFTs in general, one of the big use cases is to serve as your profile pic. That is certainly conspicuous and in a lot of cases does seem aimed at granting a certain status, even if in the least pejorative evaluation, you could say it at least establishes a status of you being a part of a certain PFP NFT community. So there is some social status communication going on there, some signaling going on there, even in the least pejorative evaluation of that. Obviously, since there are some pretty high economic values tied to a lot of these NFTs, there's also some status signaling going on there well beyond just membership in a given community. Unfortunately, we also just talked about how certain things like a price change can affect the social value of a Veblen good. And here, Philippe Dumonet says, being a Veblen good seems to be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it justifies number go up. On the other hand, it means if the price starts to decline or social perception of the good changes, it can enter into a death spiral. The price change part of this is very interesting because NFTs are a little bit different than a lot of other Veblen goods, if they are in fact Veblen goods. When we think about the examples we've already discussed, expensive champagne, exotic cars, expensive clothing, these are all things that are produced continuously or at least periodically. We can say that an exotic car manufacturer can be constantly producing those cars. The expensive champagne can be produced year after year. The design house can have a spring collection every single spring, and with each sort of iteration they can reinforce the price. The exotic car can be expensive every single year. Every new bottle of Cristal can be expensive. The clothing in every spring collection can be expensive because you have a centralized entity setting the price in all of those cases. With NFTs, it's a different scenario because a single collection of NFTs might be issued and then that might never happen again. In fact, the rarity of those NFTs kind of depend on that never happening again. You might have sort of a related collection, there might be, something issued to the previous holders of the original collection or some kind of a related new collection. But the rarity of NFTs depends on the centralized producer not being in continuous or periodic production of those NFTs. So the centralized producer can't continuously or periodically reinforce the price. The price is at the mercy of the markets. And that means what Philippe is describing here might be the case. If the price starts to decline or social perception of the good changes, it can enter into a death spiral. Obviously, we don't know if this could happen with the crypto NFT space in general, or even any particular NFT. We're just exploring ideas here, so no reason for anybody to get up in arms about this, but it is something to consider when we're thinking about the crypto NFT space. And NFTs are a really big part of crypto in 2022. Philippe also seems to be pointing out that social perception of the good could change independently of the price as well. Obviously, this is not something we have to worry about. I mean, we all know that consumers of things that are digital and online certainly do not have fickle and rapidly fluctuating tastes. I mean, you guys are all still using AOL and MySpace, right? While we might not be able to say to what extent all NFTs might be Veblen goods, we can say that there are some NFTs that are not purely Veblen goods, that's for sure, because we do have NFTs with actual utility, like these MuesliSwap Hungry Cow NFTs we talked about in a previous video. These are DeFi type NFTs with utility, which is often increasing yield in some manner in the DeFi platform. And that's the case with these Hungry Cow NFTs, apparently. Day one of the mint went down today. And just like these NFTs themselves are sort of targeted at having actual utility, not just this Veblen good effect, the mint also presented a lot of utility to its users. I think a lot of us in Cardano, in Cardano in general, anybody who's bought an NFT in Cardano on mint day is probably familiar with the circumstance where you find yourself worrying about your password typing speed, the latency of your internet connection, and you're vying with, in some cases, thousands or tens of thousands of other people trying to get a limited number of NFTs. Instead, in this mint, if you were on the whitelist, which was the minting that happened today on day one, then you sort of had this 2-hour window to make a request for the NFT. And then it was just sort of a random distribution. I guess actually they wanted to guarantee every person that participated in the day one whitelist mint at least one NFT. So everybody got one NFT. And then after that, it was random. And I have to say, I think it's a better experience for most of the people. I'm sure there's someone out there who has like an extremely fast internet connection and is extremely fast at copying and pasting their password or authorizing the transaction out of their wallet some other way or something, who benefits from the, very fast, let's try to sell out the entire NFT series in 3 seconds type mints. But I think for the vast majority of people who don't want to go to those lengths, it's probably better just to have this sort of open request period where people don't have to race and then just randomly distributing the NFTs. I think that was definitely a less frustrating and more satisfying experience, probably for the majority of the people who participate in this mint today. Well, it looks like even mainstream magazines are starting to pay attention to the emergence of the metaverse. Looks like Time magazine is running with this cover: "Into the Metaverse, the next digital era will change everything," by Matthew Ball. This is actually looks like adapted from a book by Matthew Ball. And the cover image is about what you would expect. And it would kind of lead you to believe that this article would be a little bit unfulfilling to any of us in the crypto space, in the sense that they might just like very generically, sort of address the idea of a metaverse. But it's actually quite a bit more comprehensive than that. And the author seems to understand something that I also think is true. He mentions that a lot of people seem to be equating the idea of the metaverse as a concept with specifically the idea of people putting on VR goggles and wandering around in something that looks a little bit like a lame video game. He seems to agree with me that it's more than that. It's something much broader and deeper. And that's an evolution of a 2D static internet to a future where the internet is 3-dimensional and live and moving and multi-user simultaneous, all those things, all the things that are great about a lot of the video games that people love to play today. The internet needs to evolve in the same way. I remember back when all we had were 2D side-scrolling video games, and they were good for the time. Just like visiting a website was great in the 90s. Going and being able to find information about all kinds of things in the 90s, digitally, on the internet, on the web, was wonderful for the time. But now we're decades later, and it's time for the internet to evolve, to become a 3D thing. It's not about the hardware, just like the internet was about more than just the computer you were using. It's still about more than the mobile phone you might use to do whatever you're doing on the internet. The internet is a bigger concept. And the author of this article seems to agree that this next evolution is about more than the hardware and an emulation of video games. It's a bigger transformation in how we use the internet. Unfortunately, the article does give pretty short shrift to crypto and all of blockchain technology. So the article is pretty long. This is a pretty long article. And crypto only seems to show up in a very short section where he says, "Another frequent conflation is that between the metaverse and Web3, crypto and blockchains. This trio may become an important part of realizing the metaverse's potential, but they are merely principles and technologies. In fact, many metaverse leaders doubt there is any future for crypto." This reminds me of a few years ago, sort of toward the end of the last bull market, maybe in that late 2017 period. I saw a lot of people who obviously had nothing to do with crypto, sort of being asked about crypto on mainstream media news shows, and they all started adopting the same answer. I saw many, like a wide spectrum of these types of people being asked about crypto, and all responding with almost exactly the same answer. There was this whole category of them that always said, I'm short crypto, but long blockchain. And I don't even think they knew what they were saying. But as we've seen over the last, I mean, it's been half a decade since then, that sort of perspective on the world hasn't exactly played out. I suspect that these mysterious mini metaverse leaders he's describing here are probably the leaders of centralized metaverse projects, and I think they're probably talking their own book. They're hoping that there's no future for crypto, because if there is a future for crypto, then the centralized custodianship of any ownership of anything in the metaverse is probably not going to fare as well if there is a future for crypto. Because I think what these metaverse leaders, these mini metaverse leaders, are going to discover is that people are probably going to like owning things in the metaverse as much as they like owning things in the real world. And they would probably much rather own something on a blockchain that can't be taken away from them, rather than something that just exists in some kind of a database run by these centralized projects that they can turn off anytime they want to. Finally, if you are a fan of the Ardana project, it looks like this week might be your week. I haven't noticed any big announcements out of Ardana for a while, but it looks like we may be getting something this week. Ardana says, Happy Monday, folks. We've got some long awaited announcements for you this week. Keep an eye out. So we'll see what this is this week. I hope otherwise you're having a great week, and I will talk to you tomorrow.